So it's been almost 1 year since I started the Nourish Soul podcast, and I have been reflecting on the past year and how amazing this experience has been. I am so grateful because how lucky am I that I get to talk to amazing people and some of the brightest lights in the world and interview them and have conversations with them and record them and put them out for the world. Really been an absolute honor to be a part of this process and to have these interviews. So the Nourish Soul podcast comes out twice a month, as you may have figured out, and that's always amazing. You can also head over to the YouTube channel. So all of the episodes are on my YouTube channel, but also I put out weekly videos. So sometimes it's just me talking about the things that I find helpful in either my own healing journey or in the work that I do with clients. So if you want more, you can head over there. And we're going to keep going with the Nourish Soul podcast because I absolutely love this. And this particular episode is no different. I absolutely loved talking to Lorrie Rivers. So I don't even know how I came upon Lorrie's information and her website, Living from Inspiration. I was in this desperate place to try and understand long COVID. So I was really interested in long COVID and understanding mast cell activation syndrome and really the post-viral syndromes in general. And so Lorrie was putting on a summit, and for a time it was free. So I was made sure that I was there for that summit, and it was really fantastic. So it was long COVID, but also ME/CFS, which is chronic fatigue syndrome. That's what we call it here in the United States. But information also about mast cell activation syndrome and even fibromyalgia, and it all falls under that same umbrella. So I learned so much, and it really helped me, gave me lots of resources and things to go and study more on my own. And I think what's really amazing about Lorrie, I love everything she puts out in the world is helpful and hopeful. And I've really noticed I tend to really enjoy these conversations because they are so hopeful. They are all about healing, and wherever we are on our healing journey, that we can actually feel really good and that we can have optimal health. And so that's really exciting. And I think that Lorrie's offerings, so we talk a little bit about her journey, but a lot about what she's doing now with her work and how she's helping people uncover and take care of hidden infections. And so that has really been a critical piece in helping people completely reverse their chronic health issues, but particularly the chronic fatigue and long COVID and those kind of post-viral kind of syndromes. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed talking to Lorrie. Thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful that people are listening and sharing the podcast because it is my great honor to do this show. And I just wish you happy healing. Lorrie. I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Nourish Soul podcast.
I'm so excited to be here, Kelly. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know we could go in lots of directions, but we could probably talk for hours. But I have to start by telling you how much I appreciate, well, your work in general, but especially I found you from your long COVID ME/CFS summit that you did. And it was really helpful. So my youngest son was diagnosed with long COVID, and I was just desperately searching for more information, and it was so helpful. So I'm grateful for that.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Yeah. After the pandemic hit, and I realized that so many people were going to be developing ME/CFS because in essence, long COVID and ME/CFS, which For those of you out there who don't know what that stands for, it's myalgic encephalomyelitis. We call it chronic fatigue syndrome here in the US, which I don't like that term because it really doesn't encompass what your son is experiencing, right? But it's essentially the same thing. So when I realized how many people were going to be developing ME/CFS, and I know how scary it is, especially in the beginning, because you don't know what's happening.
Yes.
So that was, I had, fire got lit under my butt to get the information out there as much as possible. So I'm glad it was helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. Even just to not feel alone, to feel like you had some answers. And even though people in the summit, you had different experts saying, yes, it's absolutely all the same. It's post-viral, and other people saying, no, not really, but it's all under the same umbrella. It didn't matter to me because at the end of the day, people were, they had helpful things to say, and it was very hopeful. And I think, that is why I wanted to talk to you, because you are a very hopeful person. You're a very inspiring person, and you helped so many people, and you have so many stories that I was like, oh, I really want Lorrie to come on, because it's just a hopeful experience to be in your presence. I'm getting teary, but it's true. It's really true.
Oh my goodness. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's true. So, I don't know exactly where to start, but I thought it might be helpful. Like, how did you get into this work? What brought you to helping people with these funky things happening in their lives?
Well, I think that the best teachers have experienced it themselves.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from. Or, you have somebody who's very close to you who has experienced it. And I want to make sure to talk about, because I have had two mother-son teams in my programs that I've worked with, and the son has been ill with either long COVID or ME/CFS, and the mother has helped them along. So I know that you will resonate with that.
For sure.
But yeah, I got into it because I developed severe ME/CFS, so myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome, when I was in my early 20s, fresh out of college. I was a budding actress. I was actually on a film set when when my body just kind of said, no more.
Right.
And I had been ill for a couple of weeks, the week before that. And I, for people who are familiar with the film industry, that you have to be on set. Otherwise you're fired, or, and it causes a lot of problems. So I dragged myself to set, and it was on a beach in Charleston, South Carolina, in the summer, which means it was like 100+ degrees with humidity in addition to that. And my body just said no. And I passed out. They had to get an ambulance to go and get me. And it was a fairly, it was like I can't remember who produced it, but it was a big film. It was and so it was very dramatic, which was very fitting for being an actress. But they took me to the hospital, and at the hospital they said, well, you're dehydrated. And
okay.
I was like, all right. So I just need to drink a lot of water and I'll be okay. Years later, that was not what the problem was.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So I had that severe ME/CFS for 8 years. And then for about 2 years after that, I was still having to rebuild. It takes, I have to do it very slowly. Now, I did not know what I know now.
Right.
About how to approach it. And so I kept doing all the wrong things that prolonged the illness. at least for me. And
Right.
it was so severe to the point where a lot of days I couldn't feed myself,
Oh,
my because I couldn't lift the fork.
wow.
Um, yeah, I was in a lot of pain a good deal of time, and I
Right.
was either housebound or bedbound for the majority of those 8 years. There, I
Oof.
had a couple of remissions, is the best way I know how to describe it.
Hmm.
But it was just, I mean, you know personally, it's
Oh, it's horrible. It's so
yeah,
hard. Hmm.
yeah, and in fact, because people don't understand
Hmm.
unless they've experienced it, or they have, a son or daughter or a spouse, somebody very close to them, and even then it's difficult to understand the depth
Hmm.
that this thing affects a person. But there was a study, actually several studies done on the quality of life
Uh-huh.
for people with MECFS. I don't know that one's been done specifically about long COVID, but again, they're so
Yeah.
either the same thing or so similar.
Right.
And what they've found with these scientific studies, and quality of life is actually a scientifically, medically measured thing.
Hmm.
They found that people with MECFS, on average, their quality of life was far less than people with cancer,
Yeah.
than people with schizophrenia, than people with bleeding ulcers.
Mm.
And it's just not recognized.
No. Well, and it's so hard to have any kind of normal life. And then, I think that's one of the things that I can't remember what you were writing, but it struck me is what you become used to, what becomes your normal
Yes. Yeah.
is like, and so, and it reminded me, might not at all relate to this, but I'm a scuba diver and I haven't been in years, but when I go down, I have a lot of trouble equalizing my ears and it's just painful and and at some point I'm like, whatever, I'm going to miss the whole dive if I don't just go. And so you just move on with the pain and just
Yeah.
do the best you can to enjoy the experiences. And it's horrible. I mean, it's not a good experience at all. But here you are. But
Yes.
sometimes it's not that bad. And so you're
Right.
like, hey, I can do it. And so this is the problem with a
Yeah.
chronic illness, but particularly something that comes and goes. And sometimes you're kind of okay, and then you're not. And it's just it's
Yeah.
debilitating.
And it's very confusing too, especially so, when we're talking about chronic illnesses, of course, they're all different types.
Right.
Right? So I focus more specifically on
Mm-hmm.
long COVID and MECFS, also fibromyalgia, because it goes along with that so much in
Right.
POTS. And there are a lot of things that go along with that seem to come
Come
together in the
together. Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful recipe of crappiness that
Yeah.
people experience.
Yes.
But um, the I want to say also, as we're going along, because we're talking about a lot of the difficulties of it,
Right. Right.
also a lot of blessings that come along with it, and there are answers, and we'll talk about, I know that we'll get to
Yes.
that as well.
Yeah, that's important. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, but and I'll share another part of my personal story, and that's that.
Hmm.
So I did finally get over the MECFS
Hmm.
after those 8 to 10 years, and people started seeking me out. And when I got ill, also, the internet was still very young,
Right.
so to find any information out there, I didn't even know I I didn't know about the word pacing, the term pacing.
Hmm.
And for those who have long COVID and MECFS, pacing is very important, but I
Right.
didn't even know about it until after I got well.
Hmm.
um but I did start to have people coming to me to ask me to help them
Hmm.
to navigate it. And so I started coaching.
Hmm.
So I've been coaching for over 20 years now, again, more specifically people with MECFS, but also with all chronic illnesses.
Hmm.
And what I realized, and then I came down with long COVID,
Mm.
I developed long COVID in May of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what it was. I realized after about a week, I was like, yeah, I have
Mm-hmm.
MECFS again.
Mm-hmm. This is very too familiar. Did it just freak you out? Or were you like,
Gosh,
okay.
I totally flipped out for 3 days. For three
Okay.
days,
Yep.
which is not bad,
Not bad. No.
Yeah. And it was a really beautiful experience, actually. The first day, it was just completely flipped out.
Mm-hmm.
Around the second day, how I know to approach things started to kick in.
Uh-huh.
I was like, okay, my brain right now is telling me a whole bunch of really bad stories.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather die than live like this again, which is understandable.
Sure.
How could this happen to me again? I'm not a bad
Mm-hmm.
person, why? All of that. And it was just spinning.
Spinning. Mm-hmm.
But on that second day, I took a step back and I didn't try to make the thoughts go away. I said, hey, you know what? I'm just going to watch them. And I said, and I'm going to love myself so much. And I'm not going to come to any conclusions. I'm just going to watch. And sure enough, after that third day,
Mm-hmm.
things totally slowed down. Those thought patterns slowed down and eventually stopped. And what started coming into place was, hey, you know what? I know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I can be happy,
Mm-hmm.
even if I do have to live with this the rest of my life.
Wow. Big shift. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was that was like, oh my gosh, it's like I have arrived. if I,
Right.
if I
Yeah.
can have those thoughts and really live them,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
then this is, you know, gosh, then everything that I have
Yeah.
been doing for previously in my life is worth it.
Right.
Other thing that it gave me was it lit that fire. That's what lit that fire under me to get this information out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so by applying what I had been teaching for 20 years and coaching, I was able to fully recover within 8 months, as opposed to,
Years and years and
right, exactly. And then I came to another discovery later on.
yeah.
But I want to get back to, I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place here.
That's okay.
But I wanted to get back to the thing that you were talking about as far as we get used to it.
Right.
And what
Mm-hmm.
I started to, after I recovered from COVID, I was like, hey, you know what? Okay, so yes, I'm feeling a lot better. I'm not experiencing most of those symptoms anymore. But my whole life, I have had what I have come to call weather dependent fibromyalgia.
Uh-huh.
Which means that some days I am like Wonder Woman. I have so much energy.
Yeah.
And it's good energy too. It's not like the hyped up adrenaline.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I can go all day long, physically and mentally and emotionally, and positive outlook and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if there is weather either on the way or, happening or whatever, then it's the opposite. I'm down here. I can't get up off the sofa. I'm in pain. My muscles don't work.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is very similar to long COVID and MECFS.
Right.
Yeah, but with the brain fog and all that stuff. So it can be just from day to day, depending. And I didn't figure it out that it was dependent on the weather. I was just all over the place from being a child, missed tons of school because of this, and was on, as a child, I was on medications for depression, for anxiety, for doctor put me on thyroid, like heavy heavy duty thyroid medications when I was in 6th grade or something.
Wow.
And yeah, because they didn't know what the heck.
Right. They're trying things. They're throwing things at you.
Exactly. Exactly. And so when I was living in Los Angeles, and I had many more Wonder Woman days than sofa days.
And you're
And I
like,
was like,
what's different? The
all
weather.
right, that's cool. Well, yeah. Well, I didn't figure it out until I moved back to the Southeast. And of course, in the Southeast, there is a lot of weather. Yeah. And like you said, in LA, there's not very much weather. And then when I moved back to the Southeast, it was like way more sofa days.
Interesting.
And so I realized that it was weather dependent. But I finally got to the place after long COVID, because I've always tried things kind of here and there. But I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to focus on doing my experiments in a way where it is focused. So I started doing experiments like with using microcurrent and using ozone therapy regularly and things like that to see if anything would help out with that.
Yeah. And
well, and that's actually what led me to discovering that the root of any hidden illness or of any chronic illness is these hidden infections.
Right.
And I know that that's like a huge sweeping statement to say, but I found that for myself with the fibromyalgia. And what turned me on to that was the ozone therapy, because I was doing that at the very lowest level. And I was still having really strong, what's called a Herxheimer response, which means that things inside of my body that should not be there were dying and releasing toxins.
Right.
And I was like, bing, 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 bing. And I'd experienced all of that before. So when I'm talking about those things, we're talking about things like candida,
right?
Other parasites, so worms, protozoa, other fungus. There are tons and tons of things that live inside of us, and that when our microbiome is balanced, it's fine that they're there, and they actually are helpful.
Yeah, they have a role.
Right, exactly. But due to a number of different things that we can talk about if we have time,
sure,
it gets out of balance for so many different people.
Yeah.
And that is what it's like, having termites in the house. And you can't, and if you don't know the termites are there, then you maybe keep coming in and try to slap on new pieces of wood and paint it pretty and do all that stuff, but the termites are still there. And if a strong storm comes along, the house falls down.
Right.
And that's what these things like COVID do, or even just stress. People with multiple sclerosis, same kind of thing. People with Lyme disease, same kind of thing.
Yep. Mold illness, like all of the things that, because of course I've run into mast cell activation syndrome and all of these things that you're starting to go, well, wait, it all looks very similar. And it's all, so it makes sense to me that there's hidden infection in the way that we live our lives. I mean, I just think about like all the medications I was on as a kid and the different antibiotics that we, you had an ear infection, you got an antibiotic. And so just to repair, and some of us, there seem to be these hardy people, like my husband is really hardy. And I think, it doesn't really matter what he eats or where he goes. I mean, he's hardy like that. And others of us are very sensitive, and we are like the canaries. You send us in and we're like, whoa, and they're like, something's toxic in this environment. So I think, everybody's a little different, but all of these things I kept going, they're all so similar. And so I think hidden infection, so that's really the work, a lot of the work that you're doing now is helping people figure that out.
Yeah, and that has been the huge game changer for the way that I coach and for the results that people get now. And, you know, honestly, it was an answer to a request that I had been putting out to the universe, you know, whatever, however, or, you know, your audience thinks about that. But I had been putting it out there for many, many years to, of course, to heal myself, but also so that I could offer, because, you know, what I had been teaching for so long and what I was teaching for the first while, for long COVID, it is very effective and very helpful, but it doesn't always get people all the way. And if it does get people all the way, it takes a while. It takes like years.
As
Usually.
opposed to months, which,
Exactly.
right, that's the key. And I think, you know, these things are so layered, that all the things can be helpful, even the things that you did early on in your first 8 years, and it led you to a lot of healing things and a lot of modalities. And the part of that is a little, you know, disheartening because they don't completely work, but it's also the journey. Like it's all part of it. And something you said, I wanted to circle back to, Lorrie. There are many things that you're saying that I'm like, oh. But one of the things is like you decided when you got that day 2 of realizing, like, here I am in the midst of, oh no. So day 1, freak out, totally got it. It's impressive that it was only about a day. But in day 2, when you said, I'm going to love myself really, really well, what do you mean by that? Like, what is it to love yourself really, really well? Because I think that's an important piece as you're starting to, you know, wherever you are on your health journey, to just love yourself really, really well while you figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. You know, the first time around when I was so sick, when I was in my 20s, I early on, well, maybe in year 2, I realized that I felt like I was at war with my body.
Right.
And that was not helpful. So when it feels like your body has turned on you,
yes,
there's that conflicted energy there, first of all. And you get to navigate yourself. You get to take that journey to the place where you can be loving of your body, which helps out in all sorts of different ways. But then we also tend to blame ourselves when we're ill for, you know, longer than a week, or even if we're ill for a week, or, you know, whatever. But we blame ourselves for pretty much everything. And, or at least I know I do. Or I used
yeah. And the tendency is there. Yeah.
And of course that, you know, there are different variations, but that, again, it doesn't do any good. And the worrying doesn't do any good, and all those things. Now, I'm not saying to not feel your feelings, because that's very important. We are designed as humans to feel our feelings, and that's what allows them to move through. We're designed so beautifully. Physically, we have a perfect physical blueprint that works once we take care of all the termites, you know, that we were talking about. And that's the main thing that was the answer to that request that I've been putting out there. So we actually go through treating the, you know, the hidden infections.
Okay.
Of course now. So that is the backbone of the now. But like you said, there were all those other things that led up to that kind of discovery. And so we use all of those. So that deep self-love, which of course takes time to cultivate, but that practice is what allowed me to, after only one day,
Mhm.
with realizing that I had developed ME/CFS again, to be able to take that step back and to say, hey, sweetheart, you know what?
Mhm.
Let's just sit with this. Let's watch what's happening. Because also with that self-love comes, I think, a feeling of safety, security, and acceptance in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And knowing that it is ultimately okay.
Yeah.
Even if it feels like it's not,
Mhm.
it is ultimately okay. And
Mhm.
as I say that, I remember the first coach that I ever worked with was in, I think, the first year of being sick.
Mm.
And she used to say things like that to me. And I just, if I had had the energy at that point, I would have, I mean, it was all over the phone, but I would have wanted to,
Yeah.
just fall out and hit her because, like, you have no idea what you're talking about. This is the most horrible thing in the whole world. I feel like I'm dying.
Mhm.
All those different things. So I understand that. And so for me to come in and say, hey, you know what, really everything is okay.
Mhm.
I understand if that doesn't land for,
Land well.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
And it does take some time to get there, but you can
Mhm.
get there. And that is one of those huge
Mhm.
gifts from
Mhm.
this type of experience, is that
Mhm.
you're put in a position where you kind of have to develop a
Mhm.
really focused perspective on things. I label it as being unconditionally loving,
Mhm.
right? So even if I'm feeling upset about something, I can
Mhm.
love myself within that, and I can love the feeling of being upset about it.
Right.
And
Mhm.
and it's a fun game once you start to get it by the tail. But
Right.
then
Yeah.
it's pretty frustrating.
Right.
But
Trying to
but
catch that tiger by the tail is, yes, tricky, but
yeah,
once you get it, it's you can have fun with it, you can play with it. But I think, what I'm hearing is this: just be gentle with yourself and
yeah,
and you're absolutely right. When you feel like your body has turned on you, it's normal to be mad about that and to
yes,
be cut off. And the more you cut off and the more you are angry at your body, the harder it's going to be for you to listen to your body and give it
yes,
what it needs. And so, and I do love the idea of, getting to the root much quicker, even though it may take you, the windy road may be on purpose, that, it's just part of the journey. And if
yeah,
it could be shorter for people, that would be really great.
yes. And that's what we're seeing now, is that it's people are fully recovering within 4 to 16 treatment cycles. Now,
Wow.
each cycle is a little over a month,
Mm-hmm.
but for most people, it's going to land somewhere in the like 6 to 8 month
Month
range.
range. Well, that's
Yeah,
what it generally takes when we start healing the gut. That's, so
right,
it's similar. That's what you're doing, is you're just
right,
being more specific about it. We're not just trying to heal the gut lining and we're trying not
right.
support the gut. We're actually being really specific about the kinds of bacteria or protozoa or parasites or whatever we're trying to target. Is that
Yes,
what I'm
and yeah, what I say about the program that
Mhm.
we do, because we do actually use medications, which
Okay.
are really necessary for things like worms and protozoa and things like that.
Hmm.
For fungus, the herbs can sometimes take care of it, but even then, sometimes it can cause more trouble for various different reasons that I won't get into right now.
Hmm.
But but we make sure that we do it in a specific order. So the thing is that when I when I was so sick that first time around, I tried everything. I mean, I even ate. I took a supplement that it was dried earthworms, because it was supposed to help out with immunity. You will
Hmm.
try anything.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I'd done like candida cleanses. I'd taken nystatin. I'd done all these things that were supposed to heal the gut. And, you know, my guess is that, and I had changed my, my way of eating for
Eating.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And that's that's the first step, is a specific, the relief and transformation eating plan is the first step, which I know that you are very
Yeah.
familiar with your own type of eating plan for people.
Right. It's an important piece, but it doesn't always it's not enough, that's the thing.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I had done all of these cleanses and all these things before, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, how was that not enough? I mean, I was in enough pain,
Mm-hmm.
but first of all, I wasn't usually able to actually carry them out.
Yes. The full. Mm-hmm.
Because I hadn't set up my body to be able to detoxify properly.
Right.
I didn't know what to do with Herxheimer responses. I don't think at that point I was using binders or anything like that, so there are all these things to do to prep the body, and there are these little tweaks that we do in my program, because each student who's in the full relief and transformation program, we go through their treatment plan together.
Mm-hmm.
And tweak it according to where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a, like, take you by the hand and walk you through all of this. And it's so interesting because I have only had like two students who have not found worms in their stool once they started either just the eating plan,
Mm-hmm.
or the actual, treatments.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. And even some of them, and that was, what I experienced as well. But even to the point of some of them, I think I had 2 or 3 who had just gotten tested for parasites,
Mm-hmm.
with their doctor, and the results had come back negative, and then within a week or 2 they were passing worms. So right.
Yeah.
I mean, God bless the medical community.
Sure.
They're really good at a lot of different things, but chronic illness is not typically one of them.
Right. Yeah, there's only so much that they can offer, and it just seems to it's just symptom relief, and it's more of masking the problem, and then you're just round and round you go, and then next thing you know, you're 8 years in, which is just God, really. And I think, I keep running into, Epstein-Barr as showing up so in people who have had it. I mean, what, 90% of us have EBV, whatever, antibodies in our system, so we've had it, and then it seems to be like getting reared up in people with long COVID in particular. Yes. Is that what you're seeing too, or is that?
Yeah, a lot of things end up getting reactivated. So when we think about, when we think about that, the analogy of the house with the termites, and when that strong storm comes by and the house falls down, it's kind of like any other issues that the person had before are more likely to become activated. So even like latent Lyme, other, I'm not thinking of the other specifics right now, but there are a lot there. Our bodies have a lot of weird stuff in there.
Yeah.
A lot of weird, quote, foreign bodies. And again, in a healthy body, in a body without those termites that have compromised the
structure.
Right, exactly. The structure, perfect. Then those stay latent. They're they're not a big deal, but once the structure has been compromised, then they're opportunistic.
They're opportunistic. Yeah, I was just gonna say, sweep in with their opportunity. And that's really the bacteria too. When we think about like rebalancing all the gut microbiome, the protozoa, the virus, all the things, but the bacteria too. It's not that it's bad bacteria and good bacteria. It's good and opportunistic. And so, and I used to think of it needing to be like even, balanced. And I'm like, it's really not like that. It's more like in nature, how it's just harmonious. So there's some borrowing and some, it's just nothing's taking over.
Right.
So, just as a visual for people. And so I know people could come to your program, and that's like probably the best thing. If people are like, well, I have all these weird things, and would it be helpful to talk about symptoms for like, if somebody's like, well, how do I know if I have these things? If you've got weird things that nobody's been able to figure out, you probably got one of these things.
Right there. That's it right there. I have a quiz actually that is very helpful. And it's, it's what's the root cause of my illness? And it really is, you're exactly right, Kelly. It's these things that your doctors haven't been able to figure out. It's any kind of unexplainable fatigue or fatigue that doesn't resolve after
sleep.
Right? Yeah. It's brain fog, it's cravings. Cravings are a big part of it as well. We also find that people who have trouble with alcohol, whether it's that
that's what I was thinking, addiction, because that's similar. It's this whole overreaction, underreaction situation in the body.
Yes. And even for people who have like intense hangovers the next day, we find that those are, those people are, and people, you were talking about the canary in the coal mine, those people too.
Right.
I remember as a kid hating going shopping with my mom to those big clothing stores because I would get so sick, and I didn't know how to explain that to anybody at that point. I just knew that I felt horrible. I would actually go and hide
in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, me too.
Right. And not for fun, but because and just all these weird symptoms that I only recognize now looking back. But that was multiple chemical sensitivity, because clothes in those places actually have something called sizing in them, which is all these chemicals.
Yeah.
So it's that, or if you're overly sensitive to mold, or you have a lot of allergies, or, skin conditions.
Yep. Yeah, you're pretty much just listing everything. My whole life right there, Lorrie, is like.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I was just going to say, and that's the thing that people start to recognize as they start going through this process. And it would be interesting for you to take that quiz too, because you're going to go, oh yeah, check, check, check.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, a lot of times it's not even, it is the antibiotics that we took as a child, because for a lot of us, they were just given out like candy, really.
Right.
But it's also, we inherit, and I'm sure you talk about this a lot too, but we inherit our parents' microbiomes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and if we were, if we were birthed by cesarean, then we miss out on getting all the good microbes, and all these different factors that when you start to take a look at that whole picture, and you go, oh,
right. Like I was stacked from the beginning, cesarean, formula fed, like, and then sickly, all the ear infections and allergies, and you just start to see, it's amazing that a lot of us, that we function as well as we do, because
oh my gosh,
when you start feeling better, and that's really where I want to go. It's like, if you Google ME CFS, it's like not curable. And I'm like, oh,
yes.
Okay, don't watch, don't listen, because you can feel really great. You may not be able to see it now, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are answers. There are treatments that you could do if you're like, well, I don't know if I want to go all the way in there. There's simple stuff you could do just to help your system, your nervous system. There's so much you can do.
Yes, I love that. I love, love, love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
And that has been my message from the very beginning, is this thing is doable, and you don't have to live with it. And you know what you brought up before, as far as we get used to living with these illnesses. So don't get used to it. I mean, you know, there's that fine line, that balance between not pushing against it, not resisting it,
Right.
letting it be okay, and at the same time taking action, or focusing on, or having the intention towards, and taking the steps towards recovering.
Recovery is possible.
Yeah.
And really, I see where you can see the gifts in it along the way and still be working to feel better. Like,
yes, exactly. Yeah. We don't want to. Yeah, you know, it's interesting, because there are some times when it is best to just let go and give up for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because if you're constantly hammering it, trying to figure it out, then you're doing yourself a disservice. But and you know how much you want to fully experience life.
Yeah.
And when you have that passion to, whether it's to give to the world, or to give to your family, or to experience, you know, something
Adventures, or
exactly.
Yes.
Then you go, okay, I'm not gonna give up on this. You know, I'm gonna hand it over to universe, God, whatever. And at the same time, I'm also going to take measured baby steps towards, you know, towards that recovery. And yeah, you know, for my students who have fully recovered, and this is some people who have been ill for, you know, 20, 30 years with ME/CFS, and very limited in what they could do. And one of my current students she's a musician, and she developed ME/CFS when she was around 10 years old, and she's had it for 20 years now. And so her life has been so limited, as pretty much as long as she's known it. And she's starting to get to that place where she's actually smiling and laughing in the classes, and everybody is seeing that and being buoyed up by that as well. And you know, some people's questions earlier on are things like, well, you know, I've always been a really anxious person. And maybe that's just who I am, or a depressed person, or you know, someone who is not really motivated, or you know, ...
Right.
Right. And what I say every single time is, once you're gonna hit a point in there where you start to realize, or we're gonna point out to you, because it's hard to realize it sometimes when you're in it,
right?
But you're gonna be able to look back on it, and you're gonna say that it felt like I was a totally different person, because the me now, I am happy, I have a positive outlook, I you know, sure, I can get stressed out sometimes, but it's not nearly as easy to stress me out as before. My nickname in college was Stress Ball. That's what my roommate called me. And that is so, I'm not an anxious person. I'm not a depressed person.
Right.
You know, positive outlook. It can change everything. So yeah, for the people 20 to 30 years, or the people who have, had long COVID for 6 months or a year or 2 years. Um, and it's incredible to witness.
Emerge, like the butterfly emerging. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. That transformation, I think that's what it's so important, is for people to realize that the transformation is absolutely possible for you. Like, it's easy to think, well, other people, yeah, and it can absolutely be for you. And so that's really exciting. And so, Lorrie, you're somebody who's giving a lot. You do a lot for free. You've got a lot on your, on your website that's free. You've got the summit was free for a while. I mean, you just give a lot, and you're giving to other people. So what really nourishes your soul? I mean, how is it that you stay connected to big S self? Right? Because
Is that what you use?
I use it a lot. Because
are you kidding?
I mean, Lorrie, when we started learning more about COVID, I was like, wait a minute, this is as much a spiritual issue as it is a physical issue. This is autoimmunity. All this stuff is like little s self is not recognizing big S self. Like, what?
That's awesome.
So there's this physical component, but there's also this like feeding your soul, being connected to whatever you call that, mind, body, soul, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
For me, I mean, honestly, this feeds my soul,
Yeah, mine too.
And I just did a free workshop earlier today, and that feeds my soul. And I love helping people feel better so much. And getting to know my students and my clients, and the the community that is forming. And so all of that feeds me. Now, having said that, of course, I do, every morning I sit down and have a chat with universe, source, God, whatever and we get, we hang out for a while, and I do I take a hot bath with candles, and I do my yoga, and I do my high intensity interval training, and I do my best to make sure that I also have some fun time just to go and play. And ultimately the way that I approach life is as play. And I think that keeps things in perspective for me.
Yeah. Keeps it a little lighter, a little less, like drowning in the so you can keep it. So it's fun, it's playful.
And that is also my approach, even when dealing with these very heavy kinds of illnesses. And I know that it's not easy, but if we can make it a little lighter, a little easier, maybe even a little fun, then we're heading in the right direction.
I love that. And I love that you're not pushing it all under the rug. You're not saying, oh, it's fun, there are gifts, but we're also saying, you could have some fun here. You could experiment. You can just look at this as all a big experiment that we're, here to explore and try and laugh at it and cry and all the things.
And I'm also like, it's when you join the course and you start doing this, it takes work.
Oh yeah,
it really does.
I was gonna say that. It's commitment. And just thinking about my 17-year-old, like, I think you have to be ready. You have to be in a place, right? I would think, to be willing.
Yeah, for sure. I have a membership program that people can join as well. And I do interviews usually with people before they join the Relief and Transformation course. And one of the questions that I ask in that in their application to kind of have that one-on-one session before we, to make sure it's a good fit for them, for both of us.
Right.
And one of the questions that I ask is, are you 100% willing to be 100% committed to this, time-wise, energy-wise, financially? Because that all has to be there. Now, that's within pacing for the long COVID and ME/CFS. Of course, that's but that commitment has to be there. And if it's not at 100%, then I say, okay, that's totally fine, but in that case, I would recommend that you go do the membership program, and that's going to kind of get you started. We don't actually do any treatment plans.
Right.
But you can get the eating plan down, and then, and these other things like pacing and mindset and emotional intelligence, and you can get those down, and maybe by the next time that we open registration for the full Relief and Transformation course, maybe you'll be ready by then.
Right.
But I want to work with people who want to get well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking, I think people will say, yes, I want to get better. But then when you break it down of what they're going to have to do and the commitment, I'm like, maybe I'll do this. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say, I think I want to pace myself. I'm not quite ready for that commitment. Whatever is okay. I often, a lot of my work, I'm helping people with optimal health. They've already done a lot of things. They're in a good place, but they're just taking it to the next level. And some people are at rock bottom, like, just scraping it together. And they're not looking for optimal health. They just want to be able to get off the floor, not feel this horrible. But it also depends on what you're willing to change in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think some of us get really married to, we're attached to certain things, the way that we've been doing them. And so it just takes time to shift that. And that's okay.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I love that you said that. Yeah. And another thing that I want to say about even like doing the full program is that even for those people who are at the point where they're not able to do things for them, and this is where the mother-son team comes into it. So the son he's in his, I think, his mid-20s, and he's not able to do anything for himself. He's probably a little worse off actually than where I was that first time around when I was so sick.
Wow.
But his mother is taking the course for him. And as we started going through the history, she started to look at her own medical history. And she said, hey, is it okay if I do this stuff at the same time? Yeah. I was like, heck yeah, let's get everybody on board here,
Right.
But he's starting to make progress as well. He's not able to start treatment yet. He's almost there, but he has been able to see one of his friends for 5 minutes without a crash afterwards, which is amazing because he's not been able to do that.
Wow.
He started to be able to look his mother in the eyes when they communicate, which he was not able to do before because it takes too much energy. And we don't think about things like that, but a lot of times when people are that fatigued,
it's just hard,
difficult. Yeah. So he's experiencing some shifts there too. So
wow,
there's always a way.
There's always a way. Yeah, I know that. There's always a way.
I love that.
I did, yeah. That's sometimes I kind of wonder if I'm push a little, but yeah, there's always a way. If there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love that. And I love that you're helping so many people. And I really appreciate you putting things out for the, the general public, but also for professional, like practitioners could really benefit from learning this stuff because
Yes. Oh my
right,
gosh.
they just don't know how to help. It could be really super helpful for, I mean, it was helpful for me as a practitioner, even though I was there personally, like I've got to figure this out for my kid. So much was helpful, just my own healing journey, things that made sense. You're like, oh, I've
Right.
probably been uphill battling this, the whole time, like slugging through. So it's just helpful on so many levels. And I appreciate the work that you're doing and what you bring to the world and what a bright light you are, with all the things that you offer.
Thank you. Well, Kelli, you too. You're doing such great work. And thank you for asking me to do this too. It's a huge honor.
I loved it. It's so good to get to talk to you. And I just really appreciate your time.